right, welcome back to the Crew Show. Day 2 of the draft starting tonight. First round in the books. Who do we want to have on today? Jack Cameron. It was phenomenal last time he was with us. He is back with us on the Crew Show. I tell the band, hey guys, sit this one out. All right. But Jack, good to see you, man. How are you? What did you think of round 1?
I'm good. I thought it was an interesting night last night. I was as I was telling Ryan before we started, I didn't really watch it. I was mostly following the tweets of Mike Silver. It's a much more fun way to watch the draft than actually watching it on television. But it went pretty. It was an interesting draft. I was surprised that we only saw one quarterback go. I thought there might be a couple of them. Surprised by Willis not going to Pittsburgh. That was the one interesting piece there. Thought the Jets had a great first round. And I think day 2 really sets up well for the 49ers.
Well, let's get into day 2. But before we do, you tweeted something last night about, hey, this Debo thing may not be done. They could move, 2 2s and a 3. And I just read some of the comments. People were like, shut up. And I got that same thing yesterday when I'm like, hey, end of the first round, Chiefs have 2 number 1s. Green Bay has 2 number 1s. Maybe the Debo thing's still alive. And Niner fans, Krug, shut up, because in their minds, they love Deebo Samuel, and they only see. I don't want to say that they don't see what I see, because maybe they do. But I see this as a risk either way. You know what I mean? Is it a risk to trade Deebo Samuel? Hell yes. Yeah, it's a risk to trade a star player for picks, especially when you don't know what those picks are going to be, and God knows. Dante Pettis was a second. Kella Witherspoon was a third. So you can strike out in any round in the draft for sure. But I see it as a risk to bring him back at $60 million plus, especially if they're going to continue to use him as a runner. What is your best guess on where the Debo thing goes from here, Jack? Before we get into day 2 and the options for tonight and maybe a little rehash on round 1, let's hammer down on Debo. What did we get out of yesterday other than the fact that the Niners, according to the reports, were offered a trade offered at the 10th pick and a pick swap for Debo, and ultimately turned it down? What's your read on where that goes from here?
I think it really limits the thought process that he will get traded at this point. I didn't realize when I sent the tweet out that they had been offered the 10th pick at that point when I was looking at those seconds. But there's some interesting scenarios out there that people have brought up to me. Like, what about the Baltimore Ravens? They just send Hollywood Brown out to Arizona. Maybe are they crazy enough to send Kyle Hamilton and Linderbaum out to the 49ers in exchange for Samuel and 61 and 93 or something like that? When the 49ers go for that, fills up two of their biggest needs that they have going into day 2 here. So something like along those lines. The selection for the Jets of Garrett Wilson, maybe there's still something alive there that Garrett Wilson comes to the 49ers and you see a trade of picks now that's come off the board. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Beyond that, I don't see where Deebo Samuel goes since the 49ers already gave up a first. And the 49ers are going to have to pay up. I think the one piece there that we also get is the contract that was given to A.J. Brown kind of gives the 49ers more guidance on where they're going with this.
Well, I wasn't even thinking about a trade today, but, people are asking in the chat, can Debo still be traded today? He absolutely could. Mm-hmm. If there was a package of picks and who knows? I mean, we looked at it as, well, a first round pick this year and maybe a conditional pick next year. But the Jets have 2 picks in the second round. They've got a pick in the third round. And they got their receiver yesterday. And if they really wanted Debo, if there's somebody really out there who wants Debo, they could probably cook together a good enough trade and throw a conditional pick in next year's draft to go with whatever they're throwing this year. I know Niner fans don't want to hear that because they love Debo and they don't want Debo to go anywhere. As far as A.J. Brown's contract, he gets $57 million guaranteed. If I'm Debo, I think I'm better than A.J. Brown. So to me, I think I need at least $60 million guaranteed. Do you think Parag is of the mindset to give him $60 million guaranteed? Or is this going to be one of these situations where, he holds out, and people say, well, he's not going to hold out because the season, his contract won't end. Yeah, but there's the minimum, right? Like if you come in by X date, that counts for the year, and you don't want him necessarily doing that either. So if I want Deebo back, and I do, I want him back, right physically, but also right mentally as far as his deal. I want him to embrace the fact that he's back, despite the fact that he's asked for a trade. How do you see that whole fence getting mended?
I just feel the 49ers need to pay up. If they want to make this right with Deebo Samuel, I think they need to come in, like you said, it's going to be over 60 million guaranteed. I think it needs to be closer to probably 65 to 66, right in that same ballpark because that's about the lowest we've seen of the top three guys. And I think that's kind of where Deebo sees himself is right behind that group of Hill and Devontae Adams and those first three that signed. I think he sees himself closer to that than AJ Brown. So I think you've got to get up to about 65 million guaranteed. And, the times have changed. The 49ers need to change with them, especially with the way that the salary cap has gone up and everything. They need to change with it here a little bit. And they can make it work out with Deebo Samuel if they want to. And I think that's the number one thing is they have to want to.
Let's talk a little bit about the draft last night before we jump into what the Niners may do tonight. Trayvon Walker went number one. So it sounds like Trent Baalke. It's amazing how Trent Baalke doesn't just wind up with great jobs. He winds up in key decisions, and then he seems like he always gets his way, which is an amazing thing considering I don't view him as a elite personnel guy, but maybe other people do. The talk coming out of Jacksonville leading into last night was that Shad Khan, the owner, wanted Aiden Hutchinson, and that Trent Baalke wanted Trayvon Walker, and Trent Baalke got his wish because Trayvon Walker went number one. In fact, we saw defenders go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensive players in a row to start the draft. Give me your thoughts on the number one.
I think it's an interesting one, what you just said there about Trent Baalke. It's amazing. His best drafts weren't even set up by him. Those were drafts that were set up by the previous general manager, Scott McCloughan. He set those all up for him, and then he just had to execute. And ever since those first couple, it's been a disaster. I don't know I don't know what there is about him that makes people continue to believe to give him the opportunities that they're giving him. Because that pick, I don't know if Hutchinson was all that great either. But I think that was the third defensive end now that Jacksonville's taken in the last 4 years. It's just it's an interesting organization from top to bottom, and having Baalke leading it is, I think, perfect.
Who was your big winner last night? And it's one of those things. I always laugh when people say, this is my report card and that kind of thing. But there's also just kind of the first blush, kind of takeaway. Just looking at the list today and seeing who went where. Anybody a big winner or a big loser from last night in your mind?
I think the Jets, obviously for everybody that to get those 3 picks in the first round and the players that they did, especially the one at the end of the round, that was a great move for them to be able to get those 3. I think that was a really solid draft for the Jets. Another one is I feel like the Houston Texans had a really nice draft. They wanted to go Kenyon Green, I think, at 13 and be able to move back 2 spots and pick up additional picks. Makes it even better.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the Jets. I mean, Sauce Gardner at 4, then they come back with Garrett Wilson at 10. To me, I thought there were a lot of question marks about all the first round receivers, but I like Garrett Wilson the best. And then to trade back into the first round at 25, or 20, what was it? I guess 26, and to get Jermaine Johnson, the second out of Florida State at 26, when Greg Cosell thought he was the best pass rusher in the draft. Man, if you're the Jets, I think you got to be feeling good. I like what Carolina did, going with the NC State offensive tackle at 6, because I really think he's a stud tackle. I mean, he's an absolute bulldozer in the run game. The highlights were just crazy good. And to get an elite tackle who, in my mind, could have gone number 1 overall, to get him while you have the 6th pick, I thought that was a great move. And then, you know what? I think the Baltimore Ravens are the best drafting team in pro football. I mean, for years it was the Steelers, but with Kevin Colbert. But now Ozzie Newsome, now Eric DeCosta, who takes over for Ozzie Newsome. And I heard Bucky Brooks talking about the Ravens drafting style. And what they do is they just draft the best players in college football. They don't worry about the workouts. They don't worry about the glitches, the arm length, the profile, they just find they just find the All-Americans, the best players in college football, and they draft them. That simple. They don't overcomplicate it. They don't over-involve it. When everybody else reacts negatively to a player, they go the other way. And they traded up, maneuvered a couple times, and then wound up with Tyler Linderbaum, the Outland Trophy winner at the 25th pick overall. And I just love this player. He's got the wrestling background. He was one of the most dominating centers I've seen in years. To me, and he was a guy that on film should have been top 15, but because of arm length and measurables and all the stuff that scouts do between the end of the college football season and the draft, he winds up going 25. And to me, that was incredible value. And the Ravens they're the best. I mean, they absolutely are the best. Ozzie, now DaCosta, they know what they're doing, and they got another plug-and-play player who I think is going to be a Pro Bowl caliber center for a decade. To me, the Ravens are the best.
Yeah, they've been doing this for a while in terms of being successful in the draft, and I'm with you. The Hamilton pick and Linderbaum, two very, very strong selections, should really help set them up for a long time here with both of those if they are able to pan out the way that you expect them. And Linderbaum, just kept falling, and I was wondering how far he was going to go, and it was good to see him get pulled off the board where he did. Good for the Ravens, not good for the 49ers, but I thought it was interesting. He goes off the board, and then not too long after, you have the Cole Strange go off the board. I thought that was a little bit of a surprise.
As far as teams that didn't make good moves, to me, taking Drake London at 8 was just a way overdraft for Atlanta. I mean, Garrett Wilson was still on the board. Olave was on the board. Jameson Williams was on the board. I like all three of those receivers better than Drake London. Jahan Dotson was on the board. He's got better ball skills. I mean, London does have a great radius, and he's a big guy. And I know in a crowd he's coming down with it. But man, I mean, if you can't separate against Pac-12 corners, even by a foot or two. I mean, he makes some incredible one-handed catches and contested catches in a crowd, and I'm sure he's got an uncanny ability to make those kinds of plays. But man, I like to see some separation, Jack, between receiver and corner when I'm watching college all-stars trying to transition to the NFL, and I didn't see that with Drake London. I didn't see it when I watched him live. Didn't see it in any of the highlights. I just think that's an overdraft. I think he's a great collegiate receiver who's going to struggle for separation at the next level against NFL corners. Where are you with Drake London, and what do you think of that Falcons pick at the 8th pick overall?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting one going there. I mean, I understand the people like him because of his ability to get the contested catch, go up and get it, that kind of thing. Everybody thought that they had that guy last year in Kyle Pitts. Pitts wasn't all that explosive in that offense, like I think people thought he would be. That's an interesting one there, especially with who was on the board, all the receivers being on the board at that point. For him to be the first receiver off was a surprise to me, for sure.
Pittsburgh went with Kenny Pickett over the other quarterbacks. They were Matt Corral. They could have gone with Malik Willis, but they went with Kenny Pickett. It's funny. It's like anybody who's watched the draft for years and years remembers that the Steelers had a chance at Dan Marino, and they didn't take him. And they took the next couple, 20 years or whatever, trying to talk about it. This time they did go with the local kid. Greg Cosell thought he was his most ready to play quarterback. I really like Malik Willis's skill set more. And I got questions about Pickett. I mean, I know he has the double jointed thumbs and he wore gloves. Why did he wear gloves? He had small hands. Does he have a hard time gripping the ball? He had a phenomenal year, 42 touchdowns, 7 picks or whatever it was. What'd you think of Pickett to the Steelers at 20?
It's funny. I was talking to my brother about this last night because he was asking me the same thing. And, I think all these quarterbacks, I don't know if there was one really that you would say even deserved to be in the top 20 at that spot. So I think it's a little bit of a stretch there, and I wasn't really high on Pickett. I think I probably would have gone with Willis over Pickett at that spot right there, especially with his ability to move around and do some of those things. Uh, the way that Pickett fits in though is the quick passing game that they have in Pittsburgh kind of matches with his skill set. They don't necessarily need to have that guy that's got the big cannon of an arm to get a lot of what they do accomplished in that offense. So it'll be definitely interesting to watch how that plays out for the Steelers.
There's also trades with receivers. We saw Marquise Hollywood Brown traded from Baltimore. He winds up in Arizona. Um, and then, we saw A.J. Brown dealt for Treylon Burks, the 18th pick, which ultimately became Treylon Burks. So A.J. Brown's now in Philly, and he signs a 4-year, $100 million deal with $57 million guaranteed. I'll tell you what was interesting to me is that, did you see the tweet from Lamar Jackson? I mean, he's tweeting out WTF. He had no idea that Hollywood Brown wanted out. Supposedly, according to DaCosta and the Ravens, Hollywood Brown made that request, right at the end of the year. It's shocking to me that Lamar had no knowledge of that.
Yeah, that is a surprise. You would think that the quarterback and his receiver that they would know what's going on, and it's an interesting situation there. That's another. What's that now? 3 wide receivers, all represented by the same guy who've asked for trades this offseason. It's kind of interesting too.
No question. All right, we got a lot of people in the chat, and they got a lot of questions. And I'll just pick off a few of them here as we go. But obviously, they're a lot Niners specific, and a lot of people asking about, any chance Jimmy G gets traded today. What's your read on the one thing with Carolina? Carolina did not go quarterback at 6; they went offensive tackle. So at least in theory, they could still have some interest in Jimmy G. Mayoko's talking about the Houston Texans. Of course, Nick Caserio is there. The Caserio drafted, or was at least part of the regime that drafted Jimmy G out of college with the Patriots. So maybe Houston has interest. What do you think is going to happen with Jimmy G? Do you think anything happens with Jimmy G today?
I think he's going to be dealt. I think that's Carolina that really has their eye on him. And so I would expect to probably see that get done tomorrow. If either end of day today or tomorrow, I don't think you see, because the Panthers don't have a selection to send to the 49ers that they would be using today anyway. That's the reason why I say tomorrow. But I do feel like there's a good chance that he goes to Carolina. The Houston one makes sense as well, like you said, because of the history with the front office that's now in Houston from their days in New England. And I think that he'd be an upgrade over the quarterback they have right now, the kid out of Stanford. So those are both landing spots. I think the Houston one would be the one that would get done today. Carolina, if it was Carolina, it would be tomorrow.
This is interesting from Terra Dome. He says, trade Jimmy G to the New York Giants and trade up. We saw the Giants, they did not pick up the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones, which is a little surprising because he is a quarterback, and that seems almost like a no-brainer for a lot of teams, especially with quarterbacks. But it also speaks to the mass turnovers that Jones has had there in New York. Mm-hmm. Any chance that the G-men could be a dark horse stalking Jimmy G in a trade?
It would be a good landing spot, for them. It would help. It would, I think, make better in the immediate piece. He's better than Daniel Jones. I think even if they decide that they want to go quarterback here, I think that's the thing. Do they go with Malik Willis now that he's still on the board? Is he following to him? That's kind of the only thing there with Garoppolo to the Giants.
James Foster weighs in. He's giving a donation here. He says, I think we get the tight end from Maryland today, who ran in the 4.5s, by the way, at Indy. All that talk about Ingram, Howard, Hooper, and we had Jordan Reed. Shanny also tried with Jalen Hurd. Your guys' thoughts? Well, where is the Niners have obviously George Kittle. They've got Ross Dwelly. They've got Charlie Warner. They're pretty fortified there. They even have a couple other camp body type players at that position. I do love the idea of a movement tight end being added to this mix, and the Maryland kid ran in the 4.5s. But where do you think in the grand scheme of Niner needs, Jack, that second tight end is? I know the two tight end sets become very popular around the league. But are the Niners fortified there, or where does that need line up on their list?
It's I don't know how high of a need it is. I think Jawan Jennings in a lot of ways kind of gives them a guy that can play in the slot and be a tight end-esque type of guy because of his size, would allow them to not have to go so much 12 personnel. But the having another tight end, here's the other piece with the 49ers at tight end as well, just to step back. You also have Kyle Juszczyk, who I know he's the fullback, but there's a lot of times when they're in 21 personnel when it's really used like 12 because he slides over into the move position. So to use a tight end on day two, I'm not sure if I see the 49ers going in that direction just because of what they already have on their roster.
It's garbage day, Jack. So forgive the background noise. I left the studio door open here at the home studio.
I thought maybe you didn't like my take.
Yeah, exactly. No, my garbage guy's a little late. It's 12:25. Usually these guys come in the morning. It's 12:25. All right, let's get to the Niners today. So they didn't move Deebo. So we were talking about draft needs, and I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, Deebo's going to be moved. So if Deebo's moved, they need another running back because they need to be fortified there. They need another receiver. So does the focus shift away from running back and wide receiver into a different need? Going into today where the 49ers pick at 61, they also pick, I believe, at 93 and like 103 or something like that. What's a top? Do you go best player available today in your mind? Is there a particular need that you think, man, they have to emerge from this draft with this need filled, and they got to fill it early? How do you view the day two from the Niner perspective?
Just looking at the way that that this board kind of falls, I think today, it depends on if they want to trade up or if they want to stay where they are. If they want to trade up, they can get up into about 49. That's about as high as you're going to see them be able to climb. I think right into that 49, 45 range, maybe there. So it just depends. Today, they have the ability to probably get a safety, a cornerback, a pass rusher, center. Those are, I think, the four target areas for the 49ers going into today. And it just depends on what they feel they need if they're going to go ahead and choose to trade up. Because if they're going to get, the one guy that they would trade up for, I think, is Jaquan Brisker, the safety from Penn State. And in order to do that, I think they're going to have to get up to about 49, 45 in that range.
Real Deal Sports Talk says that was a Brinks truck backing up for Deebo. That's a great line. Yeah, as you can tell, it sounds like we're going to be in the back of the garbage truck here momentarily. Now I got to close this. This is just ridiculous. All right, enough of that. Give me somebody on the board that okay, so they picked 29th today, 61 overall. We're starting with pick 33 for those of you who are following. And I believe it's 4:30, the second round begins. I'm looking at the best available players. Malik Willis is still there, but they don't need a quarterback. Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson's there. Really athletic corner. Where's corner on their needs? Arnold Ebiketie, the pass rusher from Penn State. So many people love him. David Ajabo, who tore the Achilles out of Michigan's on the board. Kyler Gordon, for if you like another corner with size. McDuffie went yesterday, the Huskies corner. Gordon, in my opinion, was better than McDuffie, and he's still on the board. Breece Hall is a top running back. He's there. Kenneth Walker III's there. Christian Watson's there. Logan Hall, if you're looking for a defensive lineman. Niners have gone defensive line over and over and over again. Mayoko's thrown out the name Jalen Petrie from Baylor as a guy that they might look at. I really love Nick Cross. Cross is very much available, and he'll probably be there, almost assuredly he'll be there at 61. Mm-hmm. Is there a prospect that you're either surprised is there or really would love? And would the game plan be, if you're John Lynch, stay at 61 and see who falls? And because he actually hinted at the 80, kind of an 86 draft situation where maybe they wouldn't even pick at 61, forget trading up, that they may actually trade back and try to accumulate a number of picks and more draft capital. what do you think? I mean, is there a player that you're looking to fall? Is there a player that you think's exemplary that you would want to trade up for? Do you like sitting where you're at? Do you want to see who falls to you? Do you want to trade back? All those options are available. How do you think they play their hand?
I think for the 49ers here, it's a tough one because if you trade up, you're limiting yourself on the back end of what you can do today. Because I don't think they're going to, if you trade up, it makes it really hard to get that center that you need. Luke Fortner is really one of the last remaining centers that I think really fits the 49ers needs. And so for me, I think you can probably sit at 61. You can pick up Nick Cross there. Sit at 93. Marcus Jones might fall to you there. That's kind of a spot where I think he could fall. And if he falls down to 93, you grab Marcus Jones, which then leaves you at 105 with D'Angelo Malone as your edge that you'd be taking. Otherwise, you still sticking on that. If you stay at 61, I think it's Cross first. You could also go Fortner at 93. If you don't take Fortner there, I don't think he's going to be there when their next pick comes up at 105. I think they have the Rams between them and their last pick in the third round there. The Rams offensive coordinator has a lot of history with Fortner from his time as the offensive coordinator at Kentucky. And so I think they'd have to take Fortner ahead of him, which then brings Cordell Flott, who is a cornerback that they've shown interest in, into the mix of 105.
It's interesting. I'm trying to, put my arms around where, what is the primary need for the Niners? And I'm thinking, okay, well, they need a free safety in my mind, but they do have Jimmy Ward there right now. So then do they need more of a strong safety? Well, if they do, they've got some decent candidates on the roster right now, but maybe they're looking for that box safety. Maybe Jimmy's going to be the box safety and a guy like Cross would be ideal. Then I'm thinking corner, but then they did just draft Charvarius Ward, and they may move Mosley inside to the slot, and you've got Ambry Thomas. You still have Diamador Lenore. Then I'm thinking offensive line, but, man, you drafted Banks and you drafted Jalen Moore. So where is the offensive line in the mix of needs, especially if the Niners, as they maintain publicly, have great confidence in both those guys? And I have a lot of confidence in Moore. I don't know what to expect with Banks, but he was a second-round pick out of Notre Dame, and this is year 2. Then there's the speed receiver, which I think is a key part of what they need offensively. I think they need that space-creating wide receiver. I do think dynamic running back would be very close to the top of my list because I love Elijah Mitchell, but I love him in a rotation, and I like Trey Sermon, but I think I'd like him in a rotation. And the fact of the matter is they ran Deebo so much because he was more dynamic than them, and maybe it's time to find that running back that makes Deebo more of a receiver, especially going forward, since that may be a bone of contention going forward. And then I think about all these different needs, Jack, and then it always seems like it comes back to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and their kind of mantra on how they see football on the defensive side of the ball. They really believe in a dominant front. And I just look at this, the second round today and go, you know what? This may be about edge rusher. This may be about finding the edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. Now, they do have guys. What do you think of the guys that they have opposite Nick Bosa right now? And that would be Jordan Willis, Samson Ebukam, Kamoko Toure they just brought in from the Colts. Probably leaving off somebody there, but those 3 guys for sure. What do you think of those 3 guys? Are those guys good enough, or do they need a Boye Mafe? Do they need a Sam Williams? Do they need somebody like that? Bay Area Baller 18 says Sam Williams, Josh Pascal are my 2 edge guys. I kind of agree with Bay Area Baller. I love both those guys, and they both might be there at 61. Where are you with the defensive end depth right now? They do have guys, but where's that in the need list?
Yeah, they do have good depth right there, but I think if they were to pick up one of these edge guys, to me would signal maybe the end of Samson Ebukam being on this roster because they need to free up some cap space somehow, and they'll save some of it with Garoppolo, but they're still going to, if they pony up big money to to Deebo Samuel. There might be some of that kind of gets thrown into this year, so it makes it easier down the road for them in terms of their cap hits and things like that. So I can see a situation where they go edge rusher, but just based on who I've seen them being interested in, I don't think they're going to be taking one at the top of round 2. I think that's probably going to be more round 3. They have even a couple of guys that they've shown interest in that are a little bit later on that they could probably get in 4 and 5 that could come in and
who comes to mind there? Who's some of those guys that they've shown interest in off the edge that wouldn't necessarily go 61 but could go later?
Yeah, the one that pops up is Zachary Carter from Florida. He was a guy who he put up good numbers there and showed that some explosiveness that could be a piece, or if they don't get him today, could be there in round 4 and 5.
One guy that I've seen off the edge that, if you watch him in his film, you can see that there's he needs coaching, but then when you watch the explosiveness and you factor in their wide 9, it's really an exciting thought. And it's Amare Barno for Vatek, who ran in the 4.3s at the workout. And then when you flip on the tape, Jack, you can really see the way this kid can flatten and close to the quarterback. It's really impressive. And yet he's kind of raw. He, as far as hand usage, as far as leverage, as far as, stopping the run, I don't know that he's ready to go. But man, if you're just looking for somebody who, you're going to have to slide the line towards because this guy flies off the edge. We're talking about not 4.5 speed, 4.5. Sam Williams runs in the 4.5s, and it's impressive. And if you watch it, you're like, wow, look at this guy. He's 260. He's running in the 4.5s. He looks like he shot out of a cannon. Then you flip on the Amare Barno film, and you can see the hand usage isn't right. He doesn't play with leverage. But, man, the foot speed, you see that 4.3 whatever speed, and I'm just kind of wondering if you got Bosa and you had a guy opposite Bosa who had those kinds of tools, that kind of unbelievable closing speed, that might be, in this wide 9 where it's just about shoot up the field and react to the run on your way to the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a guy like Barno might be a difference maker, especially after, a season of coaching him up a little bit. He might be the guy who's really scary good in a year.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen from the 49ers going back to 2019 when they made the draft, the trade to bring in D Ford. They want to have that guy opposite of Bosa be the guy that can just fly off the corner. And so somebody like Barno, you say he needs a year to develop, get him in there with Chris Kasarik, and who knows what can happen, because Kasarik's made some gold out of a lot of guys who weren't gold anywhere else. He's been able to really, really give them some nice pieces since he's been here in the last couple of years. So, if you're able to get a guy like Barno down the road, that'd be a good pickup for them as well. I'm looking at his numbers. He had 22 pressures last year, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah. Interesting, as far as looking back at the first round for a second, I was just looking at some of the numbers. This is where if I'm the Pac-12, if I'm the new commissioner of the Pac-12, this makes me very nervous. There were 5 Georgia players selected last night in round 1. There were 4 players from the Pac-12. There were more Georgia guys than there were Pac-12 guys. In fact, there were 0 guys out of the Big 12, 4 out of the Pac-12, 4 out of the ACC, but 5 from Georgia. Mm-hmm. Is that an aberration, or should that be a wake-up call to football, college football on the West Coast, that you're no longer really playing the big boys game? You're almost like in a junior circuit type situation. You watch probably a lot of college football in preparation for the draft. Should the Pac-12 be nervous about their standing going forward as far as football is concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. The SEC is so far ahead of where they are at this point. And you give those numbers, and Georgia is one of those, has kind of become, Georgia and Alabama have kind of become the two factories. They have defensive minded head coaches, guys who come from that side of the ball, and you're seeing their players on those sides really shoot up the draft boards. And there's just such a big difference between when you're watching the SEC versus even watching so much film, you watch like the ACC, it looks like ACC, like you're watching the games in slow motion when you watch their film after watching SEC games. Uh, so definitely. And when you say the Pac-12, they definitely have some room to try to grow there because they've been struggling.
I was looking at the list of Niner picks. So they pick in round 2 at 61 overall, 29th today. Round 3, or 29th in the round, I should say. Round 3 is the 93rd pick. They pick also at 105 in round 3. That's a comp pick. Then they've got a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick. They got a 6th round pick that they got for sending that linebacker to Denver at the cutdown last year. Do you remember the linebacker who went to Denver?
I don't remember.
He had a great camp. Big, tall kid, really athletic, and I don't know what he did for Denver this year. Then the Niners have a comp pick in the 2 comp picks in the 6th round, and then a comp pick in the 7th round. So it's the way it slates out is they have a 2nd, 2/3, a 4th, a 5th, 3 6th, and a 7th. You put this out on Twitter. 1986 is widely considered the best draft in Niner history. It took until year 3 for any of those picks to help the 49ers win a playoff game. I'm glad that you brought up the 86 draft because people talk a lot about the 85 draft. Why? Because it netted the Niners Jerry Rice, and Jerry became the greatest receiver, in my mind, in the history of the game. But Jerry had a huge impact in their Super Bowl wins going forward after that. But almost an equal impact was that 86 draft where they traded back. And ultimately, I think Larry Roberts in round 2 was their first pick of the day. But they wound up with Charles Haley and Kevin Fagan and Chet Brooks and Don Griffin and Tim McKyer and Tom Rathman. And, it was a haul of where they got a bunch of starters. And really, if you think about it, what's the most successful 3-year run in the history of this franchise? It was on the heels of the 86 draft. It was 87, 88, 89, 90, let's say 4 years. They were great all those years and won the Super Bowl in 2 of them, easily could have won the Super Bowl in 3 of them. But that, to me, is the greatest run in Niner history. And it was on the heels of that 86 draft. Now, you got a hit when you trade back. But, man, that year, whoever was handicapping the draft, whether it be Walsh or McVay or their scouts or both or everybody, they hit. And I remember seeing a video when Charles Haley went to the Hall of Fame where Bill Walsh showed his James Madison film to the war room. And it was like 3 days, according to Walsh, it was like 3 days before the draft. And he's like, gentlemen, this is Charles Haley. We will be drafting him. And you see him just abusing these opponents of James Madison with their yellow helmets. And he was just incredible. What do you think? I'm surprised that more teams don't try to do that. There's such an emphasis put on moving up, getting that player you covet. But it's football, and guys get hurt. And it seems to me, if you could come up with a 15-man draft class, and you could do that, let's say every 2-3 years, you would probably be incredibly fortified and have one of the deeper, more talented rosters in the league if you hit on those picks. Do you think that there's a chance, Lynch kind of referenced it, do you think there's a chance that today could be that pattern where they trade back and wind up with, multiple 5ths, 4, 5, 6 round picks and really, take their shot on a number of different prospects on day 3?
I could see them possibly, if they sit at 61, trading back a little bit, because Cross is a little bit of at 61, it's a little bit of a reach for him there. He's probably can be had for somewhere later on in the 60s. So you might trade back a little bit and pick up another, be able to trade back a little bit and pick up another pick in the 3rd round, maybe in the 4th. And that would be a benefit to him. And what's interesting about like this coaching staff is they have a lot of guys here that have been to the Super Bowl. They have a very talented coaching staff, and they've shown the ability to coach these guys up. And that's part of what made that 86 draft so successful was Walsh. From what I remember, he went to those guys, and it was, like when it comes to Don Griffin, he went to the secondary coach. I'm forgetting his name
Ray
now, but Ray Rhodes, and said, "Hey, can you get this guy to play?" And that's what, and so that's where, the Don Griffin pick and the Tim McKyer picks came. Those weren't those were partly the position coaches were saying, yeah, we can make these guys work. They took a risk on Kevin Fagan, who had torn his knee up at Miami. They knew it was going to take him a little while to be the guy, but by 88 he was a stud for them. And the 49ers have the ability to possibly have a draft like that this year if they decide to be a little bit patient and don't reach at the beginning here of round 2.
Day 3 is always interesting. Real Deal Sports Talk says Ty Chandler, North Carolina, should be a target in day 3. Ty Chandler is a speedy running back who almost looks ideally fit for the Shanahan scheme. He gets to the edge at will. He's got a lot of speed. He's really a tough kid. And he's a transfer. Started at Tennessee, transferred to North Carolina, and really looked good at the end of the year. I saw him a couple times, and I thought, wow, look at Ty Chandler. And I'm looking at the board, and they're saying, 6th round, pretty much consistently 6th round, 7th round. So I love that idea of Ty Chandler. I think that this is a draft where whether it's Ty Chandler, Kevin Harris from South Carolina, B.J. Baylor from Oregon State, there's a lot of really good running backs that are going to be around on day 3. Is there a player or two that is not going today? Not going to be a round 2 guy, not going to be a round 3 guy, but you're convinced from what you've seen that guy's an NFL player and could be a player of significance. Is there a day 3 pick that you're honing in on?
I don't know if I really have a day 3 pick that's a must have. The running backs, there's a couple of them, like you've said, that are pretty strong. I think that's the position more than anything where the 49ers could surprise some folks on day 3. Robinson's going to be there. Basically all the running backs that I've looked at that I've liked that are kind of in that day 3 window. Robinson,
Brian Robinson from Bama, Damian
Pierce
from Florida.
Yeah, those guys. And the only thing with Ty Chandler, the only thing that scares me with him a little bit is the age, because he's up there a little bit. He's been around for a while. Isaiah Spiller's another really good running back. I think running back is a spot where the 49ers really need to get somebody else there. I think they need to upgrade at their third running back, maybe even second if Trey Sermon isn't the guy that they expected him to be last year when they traded up for him.
Jack, how about quarterback? Are you surprised that Malik Willis didn't go in the first round? And is there a quarterback on day 3? I can't imagine we'll see one today, but I mean, let's just say it's Trey Lance. Jimmy's going to be dealt. Nate Sudfeld's going to be your 2. That means that there's a chance that they could take a day 3 quarterback that would be their third quarterback, replacing Sudfeld, I guess, in that role. Is there a quarterback in day 3 that you're thinking, you know what? I like this guy. I'd take a flyer on him. And it just seems like as time goes on, it's such a speculative situation with teams playing different offenses in college and everybody having a different skill set and the transfer portal and guys moving around. It just seems like it just sets up for some guys who maybe have talent kind of slipping through the cracks and winding up in day 3. We saw it with Brady years ago. People claim that it's like a total aberration, will never happen again. I don't really share that belief. I think there's probably, going to be a third day quarterback that makes somebody's roster and maybe plays well. Is there anybody that you like quarterback wise?
I think when you're looking at a day 3 quarterback, I think Brock Purdy is a guy that's probably going to be there for the 49ers. And he had a lot of success with Iowa State, had some kind of came on strong, kind of blew onto the scene with some big wins over Oklahoma and TCU. Then kind of, as people started to keep their eyes on him, he started to have some issues and things that people didn't like. But where I think he fits the 49ers is he's got good athleticism, can move around, and he's really good over the middle, which, kind of what we've seen the 49ers be able to win with. Do I expect him to be somebody that would be the backup quarterback this year? No, I think he's someone that they could draft round 6 or 7, might even be able to stash him on the practice squad and to be their third quarterback this year and develop him to eventually become the backup to Lance.
It's another interesting case. I really love Al from North Carolina. I'm not sure where Al's going to go. It would not be picked today in round 2. But he's got great arm strength, foot speed, a couple 100-yard rushing days. Kind of like Carson Strong. He's pretty accurate from Nevada, big kid. And those are more day 2 guys. But day three, the three guys I love. I love Skylar Thompson from K-State, and I really like Cole Kelly, who's a 6'7" quarterback from Southeast Louisiana. He got a big arm. And then I like Nick Starkel. In fact, I was doing the thing last night with Larry Beal, and he asked me about two local quarterbacks, Chase Garbers, who's in this draft from Cal, and then Starkel from San Jose State. I don't know how much you watched of San Jose State or Cal this year, but do you have a feeling on either of those guys? And to me, Starkel, you started at A&M. I really like the potential of Nick Starkel.
Yeah, no, Starkel's really good. I watched. He was part of the reason they were so good year before last, making it to the bowl game and so on. He's a really good quarterback, and I could see him being somebody that you would, if he doesn't get drafted, you'd sign him as an undrafted free agent to bring in and kind of fill that role where you don't have to spend a draft pick. But he definitely has some good attributes that would lead to landing on a roster somewhere across the NFL.
Is there a receiver that you like in this draft that's still on the board?
Yeah, Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. I think he's a stud receiver in the making. The size, the versatility that he brings. I think he's a guy that's going to outperform his draft position.
Alex on in the chat is making a donation. He says, "Love your stuff, Krug. How about Zion McCollum at the end of round 3, or Luke Fortner at an interior line? Daniel Faale from, I think, University of Minnesota at right tackle. What do you think of those guys?" McCollum I really like. Big corner. There's a couple big corners in this draft that are really interesting. Tariq Woolen from University of Texas at San Antonio, and McCollum is also interesting. There's and then there's a Caleb Evans, I believe, who played at Missouri, another big corner who I kind of like. The Minnesota offensive tackle Fale, he's interesting to me. You mentioned Fortner already in this conversation, Jack. Is there, as far as corner, I mean, do you have a name or anybody that you like in this draft? I mean, McCollum's a big-bodied guy. I don't know where they sit on the corner as far as need, because they did pick up Ward. So, and I kind of think this is a corner heavy draft at the top. You know what I mean? I like the guys today: Kyler Gordon, Roger McCreary, Tariq Woolen. I really like McCollum, Marcus Jones, you mentioned before, Alante Taylor from Tennessee. I think all those guys are going today. I kind of like the kid out of Fayetteville, Joshua Williams, maybe on day 3. Jack Thompson, or Josh Thompson, I should say, from Texas. Jack Jones, they met with from ASU. Is there a day 3 corner that jumps out to you?
Yeah, if we're looking at a day 3 guy, and especially somebody that's going to be more on the outside, not playing inside, it's Deron Bland from Fresno State. Transferred from Sac State out over to Fresno and for the 2021 season, and he had a heck of a year last year. I think he's a guy that kind of fits what the 49ers are looking for based on the size. He's got the good. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. When it comes to his play last year, he only gave up 274 yards on 50 targets and had a couple of picks, and he was a really good. For stepping up from Sacramento State to Fresno State to have that kind of year, it shows the talent that he possesses.
Sac State, gotta love my Sac State Hornets. Bzz, bzz. Go Hornets, gotta love them. The guy that I'm absolutely shocked didn't go in round 1, because I watched this team and they were dominating on defense. They were the best defense I've seen all year by a wide margin, and that was the Georgia Bulldogs. And Nakobe Dean is still on the board. And to me, I mean, he may go first today. He may wind up going whoever's got the first pick here on day 2. But man, this is another example of where the NFL has been and where it is. It's, I get it. He's 5'11", 230. And if he was 6'2", 235, he's probably gets drafted, or he probably gets drafted in round 1, I should say. But because he's 5'11", 230, he probably, he's going to fall into round 2. Who knows? I can't imagine he'll fall too much beyond that. Give me your thoughts on Nakobe Dean. To me, I see a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker with special traits, who flows to the ball naturally, who has the right reads, and gets there in a hurry. To me, he's almost perfect linebacker for the modern game. And I think the height, it's so important how well you move and how quick and how fast you are, that your height is now secondary. I'd rather have a 5'11", 230 guy who can run, like the wind and has great quickness and instincts than somebody who fits the profile, 6'3", 235, 240, but he doesn't have that quickness and he isn't quite the movement player. What do you think of Dean this year?
Yeah, you talk about the lack of size and how that causes players to drop, and we've seen that. We saw that happen. Remember with the 49ers in 2014, they got the linebacker out of Wisconsin, and he was a shorter guy, and he was a dominant in 2014. He only played the one season. He left after the year was over with. Maybe it was 2014, and that guy was just a stud. And so just because you're a little bit shorter at that linebacker spot doesn't mean you can't do it. And this is a guy with Dean who has that ability to go sideline to sideline and make those plays that you need. And he's going to be, again, this is another one of those guys who's dropped out of the first round. That's going to be a good pickup for somebody here in round 2.
J Hutch 91 is making a donation. He says, we need a better O-line. We need to protect Trey. I've seen this theme a bunch. He says, if he gets hurt, this season is over. Jimmy took too many beatings. The Niners lost the NFC Championship game, Jack, because they couldn't protect Jimmy in the fourth quarter against the Rams defensive front. And then, you want to beat up on the Niners, but at the same time, then you watch the Rams go against the Bengals and they sacked Burrow 6 times in the second half alone in the Super Bowl, and you just got to tip your cap to the Rams and say, man, they built an incredible D-line. Would you take that lesson that was so painful in the NFC Championship game and take away from it that the Niners need to bolster their rush, and that's your primary, and get a Ram-like rush so they can put that hurt on Stafford? Or do you look at that as the Niners' failings on the O-line and that is the priority? If it came down to O-line, D-line priority, where are you?
Right now, the priority I think for the 49ers needs to be more on the offensive side of the ball, pieces on the defensive side that try to bolster their rush a little bit without overspending because they don't have the space to do it. So I think on the defensive side, I really think with the additions they've made over there, Javon Kinlaw, if he's healthy, I think they're going to be a little bit better rushing the passer in 2022 than they were a season ago. On the offensive side of the ball, it's going to be about what happens at center and at left guard, because the right guard spot, I think that they're going to be okay with either Moore or Brunskill. They're going to be okay. Michael McGlinchey should come back. Everything's pointing in the right direction for McGlinchey to come back, and he'll be okay over there, better than they had at the end of the year last year in pass protection. So it's really about center and left guard, and if Aaron Banks can step up and become the guy the 49ers expect him to be, they'll be okay there. The center position is an interesting one. If Alex Mack doesn't come back, what happens?
Yeah, Cam Jurgens out of Nebraska is a guy that I really like as well, and they showed some interest in Jurgens. Dylan Parham from Memphis, I think, is a really good player. I don't know if I'd take him in the second round, but I might take him in the third round. Niner guy is donating. He says Damaris Mathis is a dog. He can play the slot corner and outside corner. Where is slot corner a primary need, or do you look at Mosley as slide Mosley over, and that need is now down the board?
I think the slot corner, when you're looking at the way the cornerback, sits for the 49ers, I think slot is more of the question mark than the outside. But the 49ers don't put a lot of stock in that position, which is, you go back and look at what they did. Their big signing in 2017 was to bring in Williams as a free agent. And so I don't see the 49ers. That's why I've seen a lot of people talk about Jalen Petrie to the 49ers as being the first guy, but Petrie is more of a slot player. And I don't think the 49ers are going to want to give up a second. I don't think they see value in trading up and then using a high second round pick and a guy that's mostly just going to be playing in the slot for you. So I think it's a need, but I think it's a need they feel that they can fill later on in the draft or manage some way through with what they have.
The other angle on the draft that I think is really interesting is that people fall in love with these guys. Then they go to a team, and maybe it's a fit, maybe it's not. Maybe they have a trouble transitioning from college to the pros. Maybe there's maturity issues. I mean, these are young guys. These are young people that are finding their way. And just like, I've got college age kids. It's not always linear. It's not always just you make progress day after day. Sometimes people go sideways. Sometimes you make a mistake. You do something you shouldn't have done. You lapse in judgment, whatever. And then sometimes it's not till you get to your second home in the NFL that you really settle in. I bring this up because there's 3 players that I really love that are all going to be traded that were all pretty high picks. The New York Giants sound like they want to trade Kadarius Toney, and Kadarius Toney is, as far as stop and start and throw it to him underneath and let him move around it through traffic. I think he could be an impact guy. I think the price tag might be reasonable. Chase Claypool is rumored to be on the block in Pittsburgh. Man, I would love to see Chase Claypool with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. I just think he has some maturity issues. I mean, he's signaling first down as they're trying to, get the ball down. I mean, he lost his focus in that situation. Everybody saw it. And then the other name is Lloyd Cushenberry III, who, I loved him at LSU with Damian Lewis for the Tigers on that incredibly talented team there. He goes to Denver, had kind of a rough year, but Cushenberry is still a huge talent. And to me, when I think of this pickup, I think of Laken Tomlinson. And didn't they trade a 5th, Jack, to get Laken, or was it maybe something higher?
It was a 7th. They gave up a 7th round. Yes.
And he was a first-round pick at a Duke, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Or was he a second? He might have been a second.
I think he was a first.
I think he was a first. Okay, so Martin Mayhew took him in Detroit, and it didn't work out. And he came here, and he was literally a foundation piece of that offensive line and was just an anchor point. What do you think of the 49ers using a day 2 or day 3 pick today on a young veteran that they could plug in right away and utilize this year?
Yeah, I don't think it would be the worst case scenario for them to do that. If their goal is to win this season, which I do feel like they want to win now, they've kind of been towing the line between winning now and building for the future. And I think they're still kind of in that space, but a trade up for a player that can fill in at, say, left guard or coming off the edge, I think would be a benefit to them, or maybe even, like we talked about earlier, a slot corner, explosive wide receiver. There's a lot of different ways that you can go with it that would make sense for the 49ers today.
How much confidence do you have in John Lynch as the general manager of the team? I'm not leading you in any direction. I personally have a lot of confidence in Lynch, but it seems like his capability is often called into question, usually this time of year, and I just kind of want to get your sense of it.
No, I'm pretty confident in him. I think he's done a pretty darn good job. I think this is they've had a roster that's been able to make it to a Super Bowl and NFC Championship game 2 of the last 3 years. And if they had a quarterback in 2020, even with all the injuries, I think they're still a playoff team that year. So when it comes to the John Lynch piece, I think he's done a pretty good job of helping put together a roster that's extremely competitive year after year.
And then where do you put Shanahan in this mix? Because clearly, Raheem Mostert was an undrafted free agent. Jeff Wilson was an undrafted free agent. Nick Mullins was an undrafted free agent. They find some really good offensive players that fit their scheme after the draft, and they've kind of proven they can do it. But at the same time, if you believe the conjecture around the team, Shanahan really liked Joe Williams. Joe Williams was a bust. Shanahan really liked Dante Pettis. Dante Pettis was a bust. And there's more than that. Jalen Hurd couldn't get on the field because of physical issues. Should Shanahan be listened to when it comes to his personnel evaluation, or should he literally defer to Lynch, defer to the scouts, stay out of the way, and just work on sequencing and devising plays and calling plays? I guess is he have a personnel acumen to him, or is he making as many mistakes as he's making contributions on that front?
I would say that the personnel acumen of Lynch, of Kyle Shanahan leaves a lot to be desired. I think I'd rather him just be coaching the team and focusing on that than getting involved too heavily with the players that they're bringing in, because he doesn't have a very good track record of that to this point.
Interesting one here from Dusty Gold. He says, we need more speed, Larry. That's an interesting comment because when the Niners went to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs a couple of years ago, I remember watching, when the teams are in the Super Bowl, you get a million stats and a million pieces of information, more information than you even want. One of them was that the 49ers and the Chiefs were the two fastest teams in the entire NFL. Do you agree with Dusty Gold that the 49ers need more speed?
I think they definitely need more speed in the backfield. I think that's one of their biggest problems last season was the lack of explosiveness from the running back spot. So there's definitely, if you're looking for speed for the Flyers, they need some speed out of that running back position. And then even in the secondary, if they're going to move on from Jaquowski Tara, which everything's pointing to, they need to have a safety that comes in that has some speed that can range from sideline to sideline and make some plays. Jimmy Ward does okay, but I think they need to look at improving at that position as well.
The one thing I would love to see them come away with this weekend is some difference maker speed threat at wide receiver. And I'm looking at the times at Indy, Jack, and they were just overwhelmingly fast. I mean, this is one of the fastest class of receivers I can remember. But I mean, as far as home run hitters, Wan'Dale Robinson, Kentucky, Velus Jones from Tennessee, who's a little bit older, and that's why he'll be there on day 3. Bo Melton from Rutgers rolls. Justin Ross a couple of years ago was thought to be the best receiver at Clemson, better than their other guys, and they've had some tremendous talent come out of there. Romeo Doubs from Nevada ran well. The guy that I really love speed-wise is Danny Gray from SMU, who was thought to be the second receiver to Robertson this year, and then he outplayed him. And Gray's just a ridiculously fast player. Is there a receiver, a speed? First of all, where do you put speed at wide receiver as far as a need? And I think part of the reason that Ayuk was unhappy this year was that he had to be utilized in a wide receiver core that had Jennings and Deebo. He had to be used as the deep speed until Travis Benjamin got healthy. And so he's running the coverage off and they're dumping it underneath, and it's a thankless job. And I think that had something to do with some of the discontent. But where is speed receiver on the list? Is there a guy that you like?
Well, I think really quick, since you brought it up, I think the Ayuk piece, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to show better with Trey Lance because Lance is going to throw him the ball down the field where Jimmy wouldn't pull the trigger on those balls that were open down the middle or what have you. You're going to see those come out with Trey Lance. We saw that in training camp last year, especially early on. Those two connected quite a bit down the field. And so I really feel like Brandon Ayuk is a guy who you're going to see more out of him in 2022 than we've seen in the past. In terms of the guys in this draft, I really do like Danny Gray is somebody I know the 49ers are interested. They've shown interest in both Gray and Jones. Both those guys are like you said, can take the top off. And if they can come in and be like a fourth receiver that they're able to bring in and kind of be that deep route runner to take it off and allow the other guys to work, I think they'd be good additions.
Jack, you're awesome, man. We could do this all day, and we got a full room of people, so we probably should, but I've got to jump. Let me thank my sponsors here because we do have some outstanding sponsors who do some incredible stuff for us, and we will do more live streams between now and the beginning of the draft, round 2. So Telmetrics, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist, make sure you go to telmetrics.co, telmetrix.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and the people at Telmetrics. And then thanks to Dan Coach Emilio. Dan is a retirement planning specialist. You can find him at securemoney.com or give him a call today, 925-628-9966. Danny's fantastic. He's definitely a consistent member of the Krug Show. And, you want to make sure during uncertain times that your money is locked up and secure for your future and your retirement. And Danny will do that. Give him a call. He'll have a private consultation with you and kind of discuss your goals and map out a strategy to help you get where you need to go. 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. Thank you to Danny for being a huge sponsor of the Krug Show. Jack, I don't know in any of our live streams that we have ever had this many people in the room at one time. Any chance we could get you to come back tomorrow for a repeat performance? I mean, this has just been an incredible, the amount of football fans that are out there, the desire for those fans to, hear about the draft, find out about what's out there, learn more about the prospects, learn more about the potential. There's no end to it for sure. And we just have so many people. In fact, we've got this one from Philip who's donating. He says, do you guys have any sleepers on your radar? I'll give you a sleeper right now. CJ Wright, defensive lineman from Georgia Southern, 6 feet and change, maybe right at 6 feet, 288 pounds. He's a freak athlete. He can do backflips. He can dunk a basketball. I like him to trim down to 275 and have him as a short yardage fullback. He was a running back in high school. He's played D-line. He's undersized as a D-lineman. Maybe you could use him in a rotation on the D-line, but I really like him as a short yardage fullback behind a guy like Kyle Juszczyk. So remember that name, C.J. Wright, crazy athlete. When you get to the 6th and 7th round, you're looking for guys with traits. And C.J. Wright's got ridiculous athletic traits on a 290-pound frame. And you can do something with that. Maybe he's a guard in the NFL. Maybe he's a fullback. Maybe he's a H-back. I'm not sure, but he's so freaking athletic that I got to draft him and put him in camp this summer. And the other guy I'll say is Tanner Connor. Tanner Connor is from Idaho State, a receiver, ran in the 4.3s at 230 pounds. Really, really special. Jackie, you got a sleeper you're looking for this weekend? And plug your podcast.
I really like Jason Poe, the offensive lineman from Mercer. He's a guy who's, he's a little undersized as an offensive lineman. He's only 6'2", 295. So it's kind of like we were talking about earlier with the linebacker from Georgia. He's an undersized guy, but at the same time, he moves and you watch him run around and he looks like he could play fullback. But he's a center guard guy that I think the 49ers could bring in if that's the direction that they want to go. And it's a developmental piece that I think could really help them out. Jason Poe would be the one for me. And then as far as my podcast, I'm here on YouTube. Just go ahead and type in jackhammer_NFL. It'll take you to it. And then I have shows throughout the week.
Awesome. I don't know if you're available this weekend, but if you are, maybe we can get you back. And Jack, we love hearing your breakdown. We love hearing your discussion. Thanks for stopping by the Krug Show. And judging by the number of people in the room, we have to do this again. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get it.